All right, very excited to have Emory Hunt back from CBS Sports and the Football Game Plan. Emory, I was, kind of scouting through your Twitter timeline, see what we might chat about today. Football Game Plan turned 16 this year. It's incredible.
Yes, it's it's weird to think about, man, from where everything started to where everything has progressed to and the different avenues that you spin off to around the way. So it's been a fun journey, and I'm looking to see what the next 16 years have in store for us over here at Football Game Plan.
Absolutely. What do you think is the biggest? I mean, a lot has changed in 16 years, not just with football, but with technology, with all kinds of things. What are some of the biggest, most noticeable changes you think you've seen in the space over the last 16 years?
That's a great question. I feel like what we're doing now,
Right.
and watching the entire industry kind of turn to video and pivot to video, as the saying goes. And how everything was all about websites and articles and websites and this and that, and then it transitioned to podcasts and video, and now YouTube and podcasts have kind of drowned out the need for websites and writing articles. There's still a place, but you see now more. Every time I look up, I see a split screen StreamYard view of someone, so it tells you everyone's doing podcasts now. And at one point in time, podcasts were looked down upon, YouTube videos, content were looked down upon, and now we have YouTube TV, and we're having podcasts essentially replace radio. So I that's been the biggest thing that I've seen, um, from '07 to now, seeing how it kind of swung in the opposite direction when this brand or this type of content we were producing used to be ridiculed as, oh, that's just podcast, or that's just a YouTube video, and now look at us, just this. It's really been fun to see it swing in the other direction.
What are you excited to see? You talked about the next 16. What do you see? I hear all about AI and all the things that will be changing soon. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to? Do you see a couple of things coming down the road that maybe you're excited about?
I like that everyone has now jumped in the space of doing what you're doing now and what others are doing in terms of creating content and doing podcasts and specific podcasts about whatever you want. Like, you can have a football show, a basketball show. You can talk. You have a podcast based off the offensive line of a favorite team or
That's right.
anything, right? You could really be segmented, and I think what that does is get back to competition, and I like that. I
Yes.
like it's going to force everyone to raise their game, and that way we are all competing, and the strong will survive, and the cream will rise to the top. But I like that we're getting back to an era of competition. I think that makes us all better. So I'm welcoming that, getting back into that era and swinging it back in that direction.
I love that you say that because we cover sports, which is at its core about competition. And we talk all the time about how the teams get better through competition. And there's no doubt that the people that are in this space get better through competition, whether it's production or guest lineup or details or all of the things that make these things good. I think you're spot on. It's competition that forces us to continue getting better, which I think is a great point by you. I know you're also into broadcasting. Tell me what you've learned about broadcasting that you cannot get anywhere else.
That what you see on TV is not actually what you think is happening during the broadcast. So let's say before I even jumped into doing it, you we all sat there and watched and say, well, why is this person late on this call? Why didn't they highlight this, or why didn't they highlight that, or why they are not talking about this? And then you get in it and you're like, oh, wow, now I understand why. Because you have producers in your ear all throughout the game, and you also have to be cognizant of time. And you know I know, as a color analyst, when the play happens, I have from the time the whistle blows to the time they break the huddle to give it back to the play-by-play guy. That may be 30, 35 seconds maybe. So you got to be able to say what happened, describe it in a digestible way, then also throw it back to your teammate, your partner, and allow him to set up the next play and call the next play. And but at home you thinking like, well, I can do that, but then you see some people that are trying to do what you do. They get out there and they realize there's a lot going on. You may not every press box is the same. You may be in a press box that has air conditioning. You may be in one that doesn't. You may be in one that's a closed press box. You may be one that's an open press box where the fans are constantly talking to you in your face. Now, granted, you have on, headphones, but you're trying to not be distracted by what's happening in front of you. So everything is different. You deal with a lot, and things are happening fast. You may have seen something that is integral to what they're doing offensively or defensively, but the team is going no huddle up tempo. So you gotta kind of have to store that. And maybe in a commercial break, you talk to the producer, hey, can you pull up that replay from 5 plays ago?
Mm,
And zoom in on the offensive lineman. There was a key technique that he was doing there. I want to highlight that. And then when you come back from break, you may have time to break down in a small package, like, hey, watch this. Remember this play? But that's the other part too. It's like you just I always find it funny when and just from a big picture TV perspective, I find it funny when people say, "Man, why aren't there more X's and O shows on TV?" I would That's what I would like to watch. And everybody's, "Oh yeah, me too. I would love to watch that breaking down X's and O's." Well, when they are those shows, it feels like school to people, and we know people in this country don't like to learn, so they don't want to watch school on TV, so they tune out. Is the X's and O content is good in a digestible format, which is Twitter, which is something in
right.
short form, quick clips, or even YouTube where you can kind of stop it, come back to it later, or pause, rewind. But in terms of TV, there's a reason why we watch CNN or Fox as opposed to C-SPAN. C-SPAN is all politics,
Right.
but it's not made for TV. It's boring to watch, right? So we kind of like a little entertainment with our content, no matter if it's you know uh, sensationalized or what. But we know what's a good TV product. Those two networks make for good TV, as opposed to C-SPAN. Even though you need C-SPAN because it's for them. You may be the person that wants to watch that, right? But
Right.
some you may want to watch a little entertainment with your news, and I think that's how I can kind of compare it to people that say they want to see X and no content on TV.
I often hear players talk about as the game, as they're in it and they get more experience, the game starts slowing down. I'm curious in that broadcast booth how long it took before, everything kind of slowed down a little bit and you felt comfortable in that role. Because to your point, it's fast and furious in the booth.
I would say it took probably maybe my second year, third year. I would say second year before things really started to slow down and you kind of get into a groove because you kind of figure out what's your voice, what's your style, and a lot of it. I've been lucky because I've been able to work with, I would say, the same 90% of the time the same three play-by-play guys,
Mm,
right? So
huge.
I've
Right.
been able, right? So that ability to build that relationship and rapport, it has allowed me to feel more comfortable. So I now know how long this person takes to wrap up their point. I know how long this person, is able to, jump in and chime into what I'm trying to add on to. I know this person may be able to, the running joke we had back and forth, you know, he's straight laced. I'll try to make him break his character or
Right.
make him laugh or make him stumble. You know what I'm saying? Even though he's so great at what he does, he will never stumble, right? So, but you have that relationship and rapport because if you're constantly swapping, that's why you have broadcast crews because you kind of want to get used to it's like a team. You want to get used to working
Mhm.
together. You know how long the replay is going to take to come back to you. You know how long um, you have before you go to a commercial break. So I would say my second year and then subsequent years because I've been working with the same guys since 2000. I think I started in 14 or 15. It was my first
Yeah,
color
okay.
commentary gig. Been working with the same guy. So for 7 years, it's been like, oh, this is natural. So now you could hear it in the broadcast that everyone is having a good time. It makes for a good broadcast, more natural, organic broadcast. So it's been fun.
Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten. Where do you think we're eventually heading with college football? Because
It's a bad
it's a
place.
mess right now.
we're heading to a bad place. I feel like if you talk to any athletic director, SID, in a moment of clarity, they would all want to go back to smaller regional leagues. And I feel like the reason why we went to bigger super conferences because the TV deals and TV networks kind of required it. But now with the advent of how television has expanded and networks have expanded, there's many different networks and different outlets and many different ways people can tune in to watch their favorite team, not necessarily linear. Streaming is big, so I kind of feel like we could swing it back in another direction. You don't really need, you know, the bigger TV deals and bigger TV super conferences that TVs have built, because you are the product. There's more ways to broadcast the product. There's more opportunity for people to see you. The reason why you wanted the super conference and the big deal because you couldn't really see teams because you didn't have the big networks and things like that. But now you do, and you have other branches of these networks, so you kind of don't need these super conferences. And I wish we go back to college football being more of a regional sport, a nationally regional sport, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
because that's what makes it great. I want like and we got used to seeing different styles across the country, like, oh, that's the West Coast team. We know how they play out
Right.
west. You know what I'm saying? Oh, this is a team from the north. We know, oh, this in the Midwest. We know they're gonna try to be big and run the ball. We know this team down south is gonna try to, be a little bit of power and speed. I miss those days, and I think we're going to where it's all about money. And I tweeted out this morning. Feels like with all these super mega deals and consolidations of conferences and conferences getting bigger, everyone's getting paid but the player. Not one piece of the pie has been sliced for the player to be able to benefit, and
Yeah.
get compensated. Everybody else getting rich around you, and multiple zeros, except the people that's going to be out there on the field producing the product. So I hate it.
Well, the old adage is you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, right? So where do you think we're eventually heading with this thing?
I think we're going to
Four
see
major super conferences. Will they
right.
break away from the NCAA at some point? Are we eventually heading to a farm system for the NFL? I mean, where does this thing go in 10 years, 15 years from now?
I think we'll see the four super conferences, whichever iteration they're going to be. Each conference is going to have 20 teams or whatnot, and then that's going to be that, and then you're going to have another subsection, maybe a combination of uh, Group of Five and FCS teams, and kind of have a three-tiered Division I college football system, which is dumb, So my thing is go back to regional conferences, have the 12-team playoff, and go from there. Like people are going to watch regardless. They're not going to watch because you're in a bigger conference, you
Right.
know, and it's weird. It's a longer conversation because it's like that's why Nebraska fell off, because they left the Big 12.
Mhm.
That's why um Texas A&M hadn't had the success they've had in the Southwest Conference in the Big 12. Once you go to the SEC, now you open a door for SEC to recruit heavily in Texas,
That's
which they
right.
at some point they were, but it wasn't to the extent of now, hey, we play Texas A&M, your parents will get to see you, blah, 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 right? So I feel like, and even with, you look at a team like, and just to emphasize the point of how regional recruiting matters, look at the state of Minnesota. You have the University of Minnesota, then you have Division II programs. You don't have FCS programs. So now, if you're North Dakota State or South Dakota State or North Dakota, South Dakota, you're bordering Minnesota. You got a bevy of D1 talent that should be playing FCS ball or Group of Five ball, but they only got one option in Minnesota. You've been raking up on racking up on those prospects. If you're Wisconsin, you have UW, and then you have Division III programs, and so you got not only you got G5 talent, FCS talent, D2 talent. So you can go and raid. That's why their D3 programs are so great. So if you put everything in super conferences, now you're giving other FBS programs access to those athletes. So it really hurts every subsequent program underneath it. Um, and it's unfortunate. So I really do think we need to go back, think logically and not financially, and just go back to regional conferences, save money on travel. You can create greater strengthen those rivalries. And then now that we have an expanded playoffs, you don't have to be in a big conference now. You just win
Right.
your conference, and now you could get that auto bid to a 12 or subsequent or ultimately 14 team, 16 team playoff. I think that's the FCS and Division Two and Division Three have already shown us the model since they went to their playoff system in the late 70s. We've seen this model work, so it's not that complicated. And I think the FBS has become all about money, and that just makes everyone suffer.
With all the smaller leagues they've tried, XFL, USFL, why hasn't the NFL just figured out a way to make a minor league system? It's not like to your point, it's not like people won't watch if you give them a well thought out, put out product. Feels like inevitably it would make the NFL better. Also, to my knowledge, they've never even thought about it. Is it odd?
It's a combination of we don't have to
Right.
and we don't want to
Yeah.
because we're the NFL, right?
Right.
So because every other league has a minor league, right? And if
Right.
for the NFL, it's such an easy thing to do because, and I wrote an article about this in 2016. I may update this article and just re-release it because you have a situation where um, you can come in and you bring 90 guys in the camp. You're going to cut 45 guys to get down to 53 or whatever the case may be. The guys you cut, 40 guys that you cut, that's
That's another team. Right.
your minor league team.
Right.
And therefore, and now we've seen, the reason why, and this is like a sidebar, but it kind of circles back into the point. We've seen people now become disinterested in hard knocks, right? Because behind the scenes, and we kind of get all of the hard knocks from the team's own video production
Right.
stuff, right? Teams put out their own hard knocks, right?
Right. Yes.
So you cut those 45 guys and you bring them into your minor league team, and you just broadcast those games on your team's website, you
Yeah.
know, right there. So the fans of the Giants can go and watch the New Jersey Giants, the minor league team, or the Long Island Giants on Giants.com. You broadcast the game. You either play it during the season or in the spring, and that way the team is. If you play it during the season, you have guys that you're familiar with that
Yeah.
that know your system, that you can pull up. You don't have to constantly work guys out and hope they're in football shape. This guy that's playing for the Long Island Giants is using your system, is in football shape, can be a
Yeah.
plug and play person right away, up to speed in football shape. He's healthy, he knows the system. Boom, let's go. Right? Somebody that needs to get more seasoning, send them down to the Long Island Giants, and then, you compete against other teams, and
I
you
love
maybe
it.
play the game on a Wednesday or whatnot. So I feel like the NFL
We're
has the
onto
answer
something here.
already, But if I'm the XFL or I'm the USFL, I don't want no parts of the NFL touching our league. I'm
Sure.
continue to build this thing from the ground up to be self-sustainable, and therefore you give guys other options. If they don't make the NFL, hey, I can go earn six figures playing in the USFL and in the XFL. I could play for 5 years, and then I'm good. As long as I got to play professional football, I can go on and do something else. I think there's a lot of different options there on the table. It's just about XFL and USFL staying independent, and NFL, if they decide to, be like, all right, well, we'll just start our own minor league, and whether they play it in the spring or play it at the same time as the regular season, the answer is they're easy for NFL. They just don't want to because they can't make money off of it, or won't make as much money off of it.
As much money off because there's money to be made. There's no doubt about that. And to your point, people will watch it. I think it's easier to watch something it's connected to the NFL, right? I mean, immediately I think you get more eyes than you do. being the XFL. Give me a couple of minutes on before we get to some other NFL stuff. It's a lot of new parts moving for my Georgia Bulldogs this year. New offensive coordinator, a bunch of new pieces on the line, new quarterback. How do you think they look on their attempt at a three-peat?
It's gonna be a tougher challenge, but man, as long as they're still able to recruit the type of O line and D lineman they're able to recruit, they're gonna always have a chance because that's where you win football games, especially
Yeah.
college football, with the type of recruits and development that they've been able to get and have up front along both sides of the line of scrimmage. Quarterback play is a concern for me because the guys that were there couldn't beat out Stetson Bennett 2 years in a row. So they're kind of, hey man, like, how good are you? You know what I'm saying? How productive can you be? And that's going to be the biggest concern. But I have never had a concern about Georgia's O line, D line, skill players, because running backs, in particular, they're going to have those in spades. So as long as you're able to run the ball and play good defense, Georgia's going to be in every ball game. If the quarterback can elevate his game, then maybe that continues to push them forward into a playoff team and also to a potential three-peat.
What do you think Monken's going to do for that Baltimore offense? Because we know what he did for the Georgia. I'm a fan of the offense. It obviously worked. Should help out Baltimore. Is that how you see it?
It's his expansion of the offense in conjunction with the personnel that they brought in. Your Zay Flowers, your OBJ, a healthy Rashad Bateman, Charlie Kohler, the tight end, gets back healthy. Now you already have him to go with Isaiah Likely, who's emerging. So they got the perimeter options. Now Monken is going to come in and expand the passing game, allow it to be a little bit more dynamic. And when you add that combined with the most dynamic piece in the NFL behind center, touching the ball every play, it's going to be fun to watch. They should average 30 points a game, in my opinion.
Yeah. Is that the toughest division in football? What's the toughest division in football now?
I say the AFC North because
Yeah.
Pittsburgh's defense is always going to be good, and Mike Tomlin's a fantastic future Hall of Fame coach, so his teams will always be competitive. And then you look at the other three teams, they got three elite quarterbacks: Lamar, Burrow, Deshaun Watson. That's three elite quarterbacks in one division in their prime. So it's not like any other division in football to where you're looking at who else. Maybe you have two elite quarterbacks in their prime in one division. And I think that's the key. And we know Lamar and the Ravens, if Lamar is out there, they tend to always be the 1 or 2 seed,
Yeah.
and no one talks
Yeah.
about that. Even with the lack of weapons that he had on the perimeter, they were always number 1 seed when he's out there, right? And then so you look at the Bengals and what Burrow brings to the table and what they have at receiver and what they've been able to do, get to the Super Bowl. The Browns are going to be tough because they can also run the football, but now they got a dynamic, elite young quarterback in Deshaun Watson and great receiver. So to me, that's the toughest division in football.
Is Deshaun Watson going to be back to the Deshaun Watson that we remember from the Texans? I mean, put all the other stuff aside, he's a hell of a quarterback, and I think we've forgotten that the last couple of years just because of the craziness that's ensued. Last year was the first year, he was suspended. It was late coming in. You think this year we'll be back to seeing the guy that really lit it up 4 or 5 years ago?
Absolutely, because now he's in the more clearer space in terms of normalcy from an off season perspective. To now he's coming in, knows the offense. Second year in it, better weapons again on the outside. Continuity is king. The offensive line should be better. Yes, we'll see Deshaun Watson get back to normal. That's why I'm high on the Browns, and I think they are a playoff team in 2023.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, they've got talent and weapons and a defense, and I think people I think it's easy to forget about the Browns, but I'm with you. I think they're in for a big year. Let's talk a little bit of Commanders before we get out of here. If you were Josh Harris, how would you if you had a chance to totally restart, which he does, how would you do it? How would you rebuild the Commanders front office?
I would focus on getting a better stadium, especially the press box, because FedEx
Yes,
feels terrible.
yes,
But so from a biased media perspective, like, you got to be able to see the field. You know what I'm saying? And the way that thing is configured, it's tough. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? So that's first and foremost. But as long as the team is winning, people don't care about who the owner is, and people really didn't care about Dan Snyder because they were until they were losing, and so
Yeah.
when you start winning, winning cures all, and I think that's the focus. Like, take the focus off of you, put the focus on the team, make sure the team has what it needs to be successful.
But I guess I'm asking, as the front office sits right now, how do you like it as far as who they have in place currently with the GM? And I guess maybe where are you with Ron? He doesn't do a ton of winning. The record is average. However, he's been in an unbelievable position through all the things he's gone through. I guess it's not fair to say that he's really gotten a good crack at it. Where do you stand with Ron Rivera, the coach? Would you be in favor of bringing him back, or is it time to just totally restart the whole thing? Because change is funny. It's you be careful what you ask for, right? A lot of change again is a little scary.
I actually think they have a good answer already in house if that has to happen in Eric Bieniemy.
Yeah.
And I feel like Eric Bieniemy being on this staff gives them, an upper hand. I feel like Washington is a team that, that has drafted well. Look at their receiving core. Look at their defensive line. Look at their secondary. So they've done a good job of acquiring, developing, whether it's drafting and also via free agency, and some undrafted free agents that have had some success. I think they've done a good job there. And I feel like everything else is in place. Quarterback really matters in the NFL, and stability at quarterback matters. And if they have the stability, if they can get the best of Sam Howell over the course of 17 games, that makes them competitive. They were competitive. They made the playoffs a couple times with multiple quarterbacks. They've been in contention for the playoffs last year. They split with the Giants. It could have gone either way, and it still will go either way this year with them finishing third or finishing fourth, and the Giants finishing last or finishing third again. So I just think that Washington isn't far off. They're talented. Um, but whatever they get from Sam Howell or whether it's Jacoby Brissett is going to be the key. But I do think the biggest question I have about Washington right now is probably at running back. I'm surprised we hadn't heard them sniff around Dalvin Cook, Zeke, Fournette, Kareem Hunt, because I feel like a good running back that has some wiggle, that has a bit of a threat left in this tank, is what could help transform this offense. So right now, I feel like the backs are just kind of one and the same.
Jarrett McKinnon for the Chiefs last year, second on the team in receiving touchdowns with 9. Feels maybe we can get Gibson back in the role. I think why they asked him to put 20 pounds on and become a sledgehammer, I really never fully understand. But my understanding is he's dropped about 10 pounds and got a little bit of that burst and shake back. It could be that we'll finally see this year from Gibson that I think we've been hoping for since they drafted him.
Yeah, we'll see. To me, he still plays like a wide receiver that has turned to running back as opposed, to being a running back first. So I just the natural nature of the position, I don't think he has it. I think
Yeah.
he's more of a guy that could be a complimentary guy. You kind of want him to be more of the receiver type because that's what he excelled at Memphis. So that, with that being aside, you still need someone in front of him to be the downhill or be the foundational back. And right now, I don't think they have that on the roster.
It's amazing they didn't score. I was talking about this the other day on the podcast. It's to even say it out loud is incredible. They didn't average 20 points a game last year. 19 points. It's incredible that they got to 8-1 last year with that. And that's because the defense is so good. Can you still win, Emory, in this league with a dominant defense and a decent with dominant defense and a decent offense? If this offense could get to say 22 points, just right around average, what does that do for the team? Can the defense still carry a football team?
Absolutely. You got to be able to score. And if you can't score, it makes it tough for you to win games. And you don't need it can go either way. You can either have an outstanding offense and a mediocre defense, or you can have an outstanding defense and a mediocre offense. As long as one side is dominant, then you have a chance to win. So even if you're able to play the run game and defense type of a game plan, you still have a chance to be successful because it's about ball control, it's about possessions, It's about maximization of the opportunities you get. And if you're able to score 20 points, 19 points, you know what I'm saying? We've seen this play out for Washington before. If your defense is doing its job situationally, not even talking about turning the ball over, just situational football, inside the red zone, forcing threes, getting out the field on third down more often than you're not, and winning in critical situations on the back end of games, like end of game situations when they need to drive the length of the field to score. If you're able to stop opponents from doing that, you can get by with 17 to 21 points a game.
Lastly, what do you think about how you think he's the future? Why do you think he dropped to the fifth round? I think people thought he was going to end up going higher than that. I guess what's your overall outlook on Howell?
Howell is a very good quarterback. I compared him to Baker Mayfield, and for me, it's like an athletic Baker Mayfield. You know, a guy that could get out there and help you out in the run game, the QB run game. The issue for Howell is that I think he does get a bit frantic or frenetic versus pressure, and loses all his mechanics, and the ball tends to sail, which leads to interceptions or wide of its target. So if he can get better versus pressure and stay calm, I think he can make those throws. But if you think about a Baker Mayfield at his height, of his talents, and add a little bit of athleticism to that, you get Sam Howell.
The line is 6.5 wins for Washington. Yeah, over under on the 6.5.
I'll go over. I think 7 is the number because of what we talked about. They play the same game every year, and I think you have to be excited about the level of unknown with Eric Bieniemy, Sam Howell, and a healthier defense. And so, what can we get from a creative standpoint from Bieniemy, and what can we get from Sam Howell as a full-fledged starter? And if it doesn't work, you have a guy that we've seen over the course of the years be able to help at least keep the offense on pace. I mean, playing kind of Washington Commanders football, and albeit in different places, in Jacoby Brissett. So I feel like the quarterback position is stable. You got a veteran and a young talent, and then you have a very good defense. I'm excited about the secondary this year, and also on offense, the receiving core I think is right up there with. They're not Dallas, they're not Philadelphia, but they're not slouches either. You know what I'm saying? Like you could pick and choose which piece of Washington you like over Dallas and Philadelphia receiving core. So it's gonna be fun to watch. I think they could get 7 to 8 wins. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
What do you expect from Bieniemy? Why is it taking so long with Bieniemy?
NFL teams are dumb, and
Yeah.
it's media has to do its part, because every time you see other coordinators, media tends to say, brilliant football mind, hot young coach, future head coach. Start saying those things about the Eric Bieniemys and all of those, other coaches like him, as opposed to saying it to every coach that runs a orbit motion and throws the ball to the receiver and coming out the backfield. Like, basic stuff, but they get tagged as geniuses. Start calling everybody geniuses. You know what I'm saying? Or, and start talking up these guys and giving these guys this opportunity. And also, head coaches have to do their part and force the issue. Hire more, black OCs or black quarterback coaches, because we know that's the pathway to head coaching jobs. So if you're never in the room, you will never get seen and get the opportunity, and because they'll always make an excuse. So I think that's the biggest part. Media has to really do their part. Speaking to media directly.
Emory, you're the best buddy, man. I appreciate you coming on the podcast with me today. Here's hoping you have a great season this year.
Appreciate you, man. Always a pleasure, and thank you for bringing me on the show, man. It's a lot of fun.
All right, thanks, bud.